This video will show you how to replace the front strut and spring assembly on a Ford Edge. This is part of the front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. A quick note about doing this job: when you do these, you do them as a pair, and when you're done, you're going to need a four-wheel alignment. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've completed that, we're going to start removing the wheel. If you have a center cover, go ahead and remove that first. Typically, you're going to find a small slot that you could carefully pry in. For this, I'm just using a small pry bar. Once you've removed that, you're going to remove all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts, and then we can remove that wheel. We're moving to the outer tie rod end mounting hardware next. Typically, you're going to find a cotter pin of some sort. Go ahead and remove that. We'll set that aside for disposal. Continuing on, we're going to remove our mounting nut. We're using an 18mm for our tie rod mounting nut. Now that I have this broken free, I'm leaving it on the stud, just a couple threads here. We'll start separating the outer tie rod end from the steering knuckle. Now to separate this, if you do not have a tie rod end separator tool, you could carefully use a hammer. A quick note about this: be extremely careful around your ABS sensor and wire, and you also want to be careful not to cause any damage. We're tapping directly on the knuckle here. You could also carefully tap along the top of the mounting nut in this area. Now that we have the outer tie rod end separated, we're going to follow our ABS wheel speed sensor wire up towards where it connects onto our front strut assembly. Go ahead and pry this out of place. For this, I'm just using a trim tool. You can use a flat blade screwdriver if necessary. Just try to get behind this. A quick inspection of the plastic mount. If that did happen to break, you can use a wire tie during the installation process as long as this is properly secured in place. At this point, let's make our way towards the front of the strut so we can start dislodging our flex hose. Now in this area, you're going to find that you have a 12mm headed mounting bolt that we're going to remove so we can start removing the flex hose from its bracket. We'll use some penetrant, of course. As you can tell, when I was attempting to loosen this, the entire bracket was moving on me. I'm going to try to prevent this from breaking off of the front strut. Even though I am replacing it, it's easier to remove the bolt while it's still in place. So I'm just holding on to the outboard side here. We'll use some locking pliers. This will help me control things. 12mm for that bolt, just as before. There's the mounting bolt. I'll get my socket off of there, we'll clean this up, and we'll set it aside. Now we're focusing directly in the center of the lower portion of our front strut. In this area, you're going to find that you have 2 bolts that come through from the front towards the rear. As far as the bolt head, this will be held in place with a small ear here, but I typically like to use a 21mm wrench. Along the back side, you'll have a 24mm mounting nut for each one of these pieces of hardware. Let's continue on with removing each one of the mounting nuts. We're leaving the bolts in place temporarily. Just make sure that that is broken free. It does move. Next mounting bolt. That bolt moves as well. Now at this point, there's something that I have to mention before we start removing our hardware here. As we remove these, you may find that the steering knuckle wants to pull out and away. We need to control this action because we could potentially cause damage to our CV axle boot, whether it's the outer boot or the inner boot. Either way, you do not want to put a tug on it, which could potentially cause damage. Let's start removing those bolts. A close inspection of each one of these bolts to confirm they're not rotted, weak, or damaged. If they are, you need to replace them. Let's hang this aside. At this point, we'll pause in the fender well, and we're making our way up into the engine compartment. In the engine compartment, along the side of the vehicle that you're working on, you're going to be looking for your strut tower. Now, I'm working on the driver's side, so this is where I can see the battery, and looking underneath our windshield wiper cowl is where we can see where the strut tower is and our upper hardware. As far as this upper hardware, you're going to be using a 13mm to start removing each piece of hardware here. One thing I would mention is I typically like to leave one of the most outward ones for last. So with that said, I'm going all the way in, and I'm going to do this with a ratcheting wrench once I break it free with my 13mm. There's one piece of hardware. We'll repeat the same for all others. As I mentioned, I'm saving this one for last. As for my last piece of hardware, as I start loosening this, we also need to be paying attention down inside of the wheel well. This is the last thing holding our front strut in position, so we need to make sure this does not fall down and potentially cause any damage or hurt anybody. Once I have this loose enough, I'm going to reach inside, hold onto the front strut while I continue on fully removing that mounting nut. Okay, I'm holding that strut. There's that. So now as we start bringing this down, we need to pay attention to our flex hose. We don't want to cause any damage. We'll just start pulling it out of position. There it is, friend. Now, prior to installation of any brand new part, of course, we want to make sure we clean and inspect our mounting area. If you're looking down at your steering knuckle, we want to pay attention where that strut goes around the knuckle. We'll just wipe all this down, make sure it's not rotted, weak, or damaged. This looks good. Now it's time to install our front strut. We'll make sure we have the one for the proper side of the vehicle here. When we bring this into position, we're going to carefully come in and over this area. We want to be aware of our brake flex hose and our ABS wire. Once I have it down through here, I'm going to continue on lifting it up as far as possible. I need to align my upper studs of my front strut with the strut tower, so we'll have to look up inside the engine compartment. Now that I have that pressed into position, I'm going to continue on with my 4 mounting nuts. This can be easiest if you had a helper holding it for you. Now at this point, we have all 4 pieces of hardware started in this area. We're leaving these loose. We're going to continue on with everything that we have to do inside the fender well. We're going to reinstall the wheel. Once everything's torqued down there, we'll make our way back up here with the full weight of the vehicle on the ground so we can tighten and torque these. Red thread locker. Now that I have both of those started on, I'm going to bottom them out. We're going to torque each of these to 166 foot-pounds. Now it's time to reinstall the brake flex hose along the forward aspect here. This is going to go underneath this slot. We're aligning the mounting bolt port. That mounting bolt comes through from the inboard side. Go ahead and start that in and snug it up. Double check to make sure that's properly secured. Now we're on the other side for the ABS wire. Our plastic connector is still in good usable order, so I'm just taking that, I'm pressing it into the strut as far as possible, and of course making sure it's secured. Once again, you can use a wire tie if necessary. Now along the back side of the knuckle, we're going to attach our outer tie rod end to the knuckle. We'll carefully pivot things as necessary so we can align them. Start on our mounting nut. On this application, we do have a castle nut, which means it has slots. If you were looking at the tie rod stud, you're going to find a port leading through it. Go ahead and snug this up. Torque it to 35 foot-pounds, and then we'll make sure we can install our locking cotter pin. Now, when we look at this, we're attempting to make sure we have our slot aligned with the port on the tie rod end. If it's not aligned, continue tightening until the very next slot is, and then install that locking cotter pin. Now, since mine is not fully aligned, I'm just going to continue tightening as I mentioned. One last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our front wheel. Once you have all 5 lug nuts on there, we're going to bottom them out in a crisscross manner. We'll get the wheel safely on the ground and then torque each of the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Now I have the wheel back on the ground. Let's go ahead and torque these to that 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. If you have a center cover, install that now. When we install the center cover, we'll make sure that our lug nuts align with the corresponding ports here. Press it in, double check to make sure it's secured all the way around. Now with the full weight of the vehicle back down on the ground after torquing our front wheel, we're up inside the engine compartment. This is the area that we're going to be snugging each one of our 4 pieces of hardware and then torquing them to 26 foot-pounds. I'm using a 13mm on my torque wrench here. Just make sure we torque all of these. Okay, friend, we finished the installation of one side of our vehicle's front strut assemblies. Whenever you do these, you do them as a pair. The process for one side of the vehicle will be the exact same thing as the other. Now, once you've completed both of those, you're going to want to close the hood, you're going to take your vehicle for a road test, listen for any odd noises, and get yourself in alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.